hereby call to order this meeting of the District 200 School Board. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree? Here. Mrs. Erickson?
Here.
Mr. Gambiani?
Here.
Mr. Hanlon?
Here.
Mr. Matheson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Thurman?
Here. Mr. Bacon, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is our communication with the host school. Mr. Bacon again.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry. I failed my first test. Failure is good, though. Still, it'll come. It'll come. What did you say? Oh, here we go. Well, members of the board, senior leadership team, district administrators and staff, colleagues, and community members, welcome to Sandburg School. We are honored to be your hosts this evening. Recently, I've been challenged to identify my vision for why I do what I do as the Sandburg principal. I've done this many times and seem to always land in the same place, which is student learning and growth. This is all well and good, but for whatever reason, I was motivated to look at it more deeply, which I have done. So here it is. It's really not a new vision. It's why I chose to become a principal in the first place. And I'm happy to say that it has become a shared vision with the Sandburg staff and community. My vision and our vision at Sandburg is to make difference makers. You see, difference makers shape the future, and we all need a future worth looking forward to. Difference makers are people who are inspired and equipped to make significant positive impacts in the world. Traditional learning is important, but it is only one of the essential building blocks in becoming a difference maker. I'm talking about real difference makers, the kind this world so desperately needs. We need leaders that are real difference makers. We need doers and workers that are real difference makers. We need innovators and problem solvers that are real difference makers. Real difference makers are relentless. A difference maker will never give up. She will understand that failure and roadblocks and obstacles are simply learning moments on the road to greater things. Ever positive. A difference maker doesn't let complainers, whiners, and naysayers slow him down. Altruistic and authentic. A difference maker is others focused, not looking for credit, but doing it for the right reasons, not for selfish ambitions. Leading. A difference maker is willing to take the first step. Sometimes the best thing to do with a difference maker is simply get out of the way. If, as we help our students learn the skills needed to be successful, we don't go further to make difference makers, then we are depriving this world of the potential that already exists in our students. We need to believe that we can make difference makers. We need to believe in our students. They need to know that we all believe in them. We need to help them believe in themselves. It's time to look at each and every child as a difference maker capable of shaping the future. And that's what we're doing here at Sandburg. And we certainly could not do it as well without an incredible partnership with the Sandburg PTA. So here representing our PTA tonight is Trish Boone, one of our co-presidents, and Beth Powell, chair of our hospitality. Let's hear it for the PTA. And a few other members showed up too. Thank you so much. I also recognize and appreciate that this is the belief of our district leadership and the Board of Education. Without your passionate commitment to the success of all District 200 students, we would not be equipped to make such a difference. Next Wednesday, November 15th, is School Board Member Day, And as part of the nearly 6,000 elected school board members in the state of Illinois, the members of this Board of Education are worthy of such recognition. The theme for this year's School Board Members Day is Leading by Learning. Honestly, the best way to inspire learning in others is to model it yourself. And that's exactly what takes place in our district. On behalf of the entire Sandburg community, I extend my heartfelt appreciation to each of you. So let's hear from a few difference makers from Sandburg as they express their appreciation. We've had a group of Sandburg students who used our new recording equipment made available through a Student Excellence Grant. They created a video as a way of expressing their appreciation to our Board of Education. Please enjoy.
November 15th is School Board Members Day. This year's theme given to the day by the Illinois Association of School Boards is Leading by Learning.
We wanted to take the opportunity to learn more about ourselves. We started by going around Sandburg asking students what they already knew about a school board.
Member Day.
It has stuff on it.
What does a school board member do?
I have no clue.
What a school board member does is they put up the signs on the billboards.
Sign on board. Do you know what a school board member does?
They be respectful, they be responsible, and they be kind to other students.
Okay.
Pictures on the board. Help organize? I don't know.
They help us with things like helping with, like if we get lost in the school, then they help us go to our classroom, and they can help us with a little bit of our homework if we don't understand it. Yeah.
A school board member.
Everyone may not truly realize how important the school board is, but we have learned that it is very important.
The Board of our Education knows about our curriculum,
Volunteers their time,
makes big and important decisions that impacts our education,
and listens and represents our community.
The school board creates opportunities for our students to learn as much as possible.
And they look out for our best interest.
We want to thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you. THANKYO. Yeah. Thank you.
And I echo my thanks. Thanks a lot for all you do.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. The next item on the agenda, are there any modifications to the agenda that any board member would wish to propose? Hearing none, we move to recognition and achievements. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. We are pleased this evening to bring two recognitions to the Board of Education and honor them in front of our community. And I'm going to first start with the recognition of Mr. Jim Stankovitz. Jim Stankovitz recently received the Symetra Heroes in the Classroom Award. This program recognizes the passion and dedication of teachers throughout the Chicago area. And during the NFL season, Symetra, the Chicago Bears, and Arthur Gallagher select 16 exceptional K-12 teachers to be honored both in their classrooms and on the field. And District 200 was honored to have one of those individuals be recognized, and I'm going to invite Mr. Phil Calcasi, who is the science chair at Wheaton Warrenville South, to tell everybody a little bit about a special educator in 200.
Good evening. As Dr. Schuler said, my name is Phil Calcasi, and I am the Science Department Chair at Wheaton Warrenville South High School, and much to Mr. Stankovitz's chagrin, I am the guilty party that was responsible for nominating him for this award. And to be very honest with you, one morning when I got the email about the application from our assistant principal, Mrs. Lori Campos, I was doing purchase orders and I really didn't want to do them anymore. So I decided to fill out this application for Mr. Stankovitz. And part of the reason that I did that was because the Bears were sponsoring the award, and Mr. Stankovitz's son, JJ, is a reporter who covers the Chicago Bears for NBC Sports Chicago. And I thought that if Jim were fortunate enough to win, that it would be fun for him to spend time on the sideline before a Bears game with his son. And so as I was filling out the award, the award application, they asked us to write an essay, of course, which again I didn't want to do, about Mr. Stankovitz and why he should be considered a hero in the classroom. And as I was thinking about what I should write, I thought back to the 3 times that Mr. Stankovitz has changed my own life for the better. The first of which was when I was in elementary school, middle school actually, and my parents were looking for a place to send me to high school. And at an open house, they met Mr. Stankovitz, and that was the end of the search. You're going to Marist High School in Chicago, where Mr. Stankovitz taught originally, and I was lucky enough to have him as my physics teacher when I was in high school. And the second time that he changed my life and the 5,000 or some odd students that he's had in his 42 years of teaching was when he instilled in all of us an interest and a love in learning of math and science that is carried with many of us to this day. But the third and most profound time that he changed my life and so many others was when I was coincidentally ended up at the same building that he worked at through a series of weird circumstances. We both ended up working at Wheaton South, and when I came to his classroom 10 years after I had been his own student, his classroom looked totally different. Kids were working in groups around computers with whiteboards and asking questions and presenting to each other. And I was in awe of his new classroom, and I said to him, "How do I teach like this?" And he said, "Well, you can come to my summer workshop." And Jim has run over 26 summer workshops that have affected over 400 physics teachers from across the country, from across the state, and from across the world. He's had teachers from Dubai and Germany attend his summer workshops. And we hold those summer workshops now at Wheaton South every summer, where we have hundreds and hundreds of teachers over the past 5 summers come to learn how to teach science from Jim Stankovitz. And that's why I ultimately felt like he was a hero in the classroom, and that's why I am so grateful to the Bears and Symetra that they were able to nominate him, and he was able to spend time with his son and with his family on the field before the game. But most of all, we nominated him just to thank him for everything that he's done for us and for the district. So congratulations, Mr. Stankovitz.
I have to thank Phil. It has been so wonderful working with Phil as department chairman. And if you ever need a secret kept, he's your guy. I knew absolutely nothing about this. He walks into my 5th period room. That's not so unusual. My colleague Matt walks into my 5th period room. Okay, that's not so unusual. Then my wife walks in the room, and my son walks in the room, and George McCaskey walks in the room. Hundreds of students, all the teachers that were free came in. It was unbelievable. And it is all thanks to Phil, who will be up here soon because he has been recognized as one of the 5 finalists for the Presidential Award in the state of Illinois. So thanks to Phil and Matt and my colleagues and to the board for recognizing me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Jim. Congratulations. Our second recognition this evening is Mr. Joe Kish. Joe recently received the Everyday Hero Award from the Suburban Life publications. Everyday heroes are people who make DuPage and Cook counties great places to live and work. They make a difference through their actions rather than their words. Joe has been an educator, coach, and mentor for more than 23 years. He never lets a kid slip. If you're in his presence, you feel like you're the most important person in the world, and he never forgets your name. Joe makes sure that all kids are engaged in school through academics, sports, and activities. He started a skate club at Franklin geared to engaging kids who weren't involved in other activities. He's raised tens of thousands of dollars for the school and nonprofits through his annual dodgeball tournament that gathers hundreds of athletes and first responders from around the state to play dodgeball for a cause. You'll often find Joe waiting at bus stops with kids, making sure that at-risk students have school supplies, uniforms, or food, and just being a supportive adult to any kid who needs it. Joe befriends anybody that walks through the doors at his school, and he is a true hero to the children and families of Franklin Middle School. So, Mr. Joe Kish, we honor you this evening for being an everyday hero.
First, I'd like to say thank you to Aaron for the short, succinct speech today and welcoming us. Nice job, Aaron. Thanks to Sandburg. Thanks to the board. And congratulations to my old colleague, Jim Stankiewicz. I think he might have been one of the first teachers I ever observed, and remember being in his class and thinking, when am I going to tell this guy about teaching? Yeah. So, in terms of the award, you know, I certainly don't consider myself a hero. It makes me uncomfortable, but the recognition is certainly nice, and just like to use it as an opportunity. The things that Dr. Schuler mentioned, and you know, I think we're in the article are truly team efforts. I'm blessed with great colleagues, family, friends. You know, just an example here from today. One of the things the article talked about is at Franklin, we, in addition to dodgeball, we have a creative fundraiser where we sell firewood. We're getting the market cornered on it in Wheaton. You either need firewood or you don't. It's not like a lot of other things that we sell. But that operation is impossible without great friends. He's a high school friend and one of his partners from Wheaton Snow and Ice. They're also both Wheaton firemen, Kevin King and Johnny Cochran. They've graciously given us a ton of space to store the wood where we split it. Years ago they bought a $5,000 hydraulic splitter. I was up there after school today. There was a gentleman that's been retired from the Wheaton Fire Department for years, a guy by the name of Jim Carsons that came down from the Del Webb community in Huntley. It must have been a slow day up there. And he came down to help out. And, you know, it's just so typical of, you know, the team effort that goes into something like that. Those guys put in countless hours, their own money, their own time. And I just feel embarrassed taking credit for something like that. And the same thing with our staff at Franklin. I can't even begin to describe how selfless the teachers, our support staff are. At the recognition breakfast, I talked about our custodian, Jose Hernandez. He drives out each day from the little village neighborhood in Chicago. And I know there are certainly jobs that would pay him more that are closer to home, but he comes to Franklin because he cares. And I think that's what we're missing in this day and age. You know, it goes right along with the difference makers that Aaron was talking about earlier. But, you know, again, all these things are a great team effort. I'm humbled by the award, and thank you.
now move to the public comments. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a question or comment on an agenda item. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. The board strives to make the best decisions for the district, and public input in a variety of venues is very helpful. The board must protect the civility and decorum of this meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of the board and the democratic process in your comments tonight. Please use the microphone, state your name, and whether you're a resident of the district, and address your comments to the board. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I'll ask Mr. Paulson, our Vice President, to keep track of the time. Please be factual and courteous and do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board and staff. If you feel your matter needs to be discussed in more detail, please attend the board's chance to chat or present your comments to us in writing. First individual I have signed up for public comments is Nikki King.
I'm Nikki King. I'm a resident of Wheaton. I've never done this before, so it's very aggravating. But I had talked to Dr. Schuler about the Jefferson thing. I don't think it's fair that the referendum was turned down twice by your community, and you guys are already going ahead and doing it anyway without notifying the community. And it says you're going to disrupt 1.5. No, you're not going to disrupt it, you're taking it away. And even though you're not upping our taxes, something's going to happen to where our taxes are going to get raised. And I don't think it's fair that you guys are deciding on your own to totally take Jefferson away, take that land away, and do what you guys want to anyway. I don't think that's your decision. Your community spoke and said they don't want that. And you guys are just doing it anyway. I sent Dr. Schuler several articles from Mr. Gambiani or whatever. I told you that article in the Herald. And he was quoted saying, you don't have the funding for this. And what happened, you guys want us to trust you, but where did the $40,000 go to Dr. Harris? Why didn't you ask for that back? You're asking us to trust you guys, but you guys have done nothing to gain our trust. You're doing this behind our backs. I don't know what else to say. I mean, Jefferson can be fixed without using that land. You don't need that huge parking space. No one parks. It's a drop-off service. You don't need whatever lanes and parking spaces you have. You don't need that whole block for a preschool. You're taking our whole block. 2 baseball fields. Your community plays baseball there, and you're taking that away from them. You want kids to be involved in athletic programs? Well, you're now minus a baseball field. Where are those kids going to play baseball? Where are they going to play? Jefferson uses that field for running around. You're taking that field away from them without even asking their community. I think it's selfish. I think it's wrong. And you guys are doing it in a sneaky way. I've talked to you about it. You don't have the money to do it. It was quoted in the paper. You do not have the money, and that was 2 years ago. So how you can have all this money now to do it and take care of costs? You guys did the referendum, and all these schools need fixed, but now all of a sudden they don't need fixed, and you're going to use that money for Jefferson. Oh, time's up? Okay. Do I just go back? Thank you.
The next individual I have on the listed for public comments is Harold Lonks. Harold.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Harold Lonks. I am a resident of District 200. I just got a couple of comments regarding the agenda for tonight. One thing is number 6 on the consent agenda. Why is the amount on the Synergy renewal left off the agenda? and I'd like to know how much the district is saving by removing the master schedule builder from the contract. Now, number 9 on the agenda, which is board operating principles. I read that a couple days ago, and I have a couple questions. I believe this item should be removed and be put out for public comment like any other board policy change. After reading the board operating principles, I'd like to make a few comments. Number 1, on the key responsibilities, the item says maintain open and honest communications. If you look under expected behaviors, it states board members will make every effort to submit to the superintendent questions on the agenda prior to the meeting so they can be answered before the meeting. This contradicts maintaining open and honest communication and also violates the Open Meeting Act by having board discussions in private outside of public view. Under agreements number 9, it states the board as a whole to do its work openly. How does sending private emails to the superintendent and then responding to all board members constitute working openly? Please explain that to the public. Number 2, under agreement number 3, it says no board member or subset of the Board of Ed has the authority to act or speak on behalf of the board without consent of the full board. Does this mean that a board member can't accept an award on behalf of the board of the district without prior consent? If the board can't speak without prior consent, then why they can't accept any award, which is an act? Do you realize how ridiculous this item sounds when applied to everything? This should be removed since board members should know how to behave and what to say without full board consent. Number 3, under agreement number 10, when confronted with concerns from stakeholders, it states that he or she refer the stakeholder to the appropriate staff within the chain of command. But if you look under expected behavior number 6, it contradicts it. It states that board members will always communicate through the superintendent. Why the contradiction on how to handle concerns by parents and/or community members? And then number 4, under expected behavior number 3, it states that casting a no vote, individual members are encouraged to explain the reason for their vote. I think it also should include why you cast a yes vote, so the public can understand how you think. Number 5, expected behavior, item number 11, says we will focus on the future, not the past. Why is this expected behavior? Poor past decisions drives the future focus. This item should just be removed. Number 6, expected behavior number 12, out of respect of all participants, we communicate openly and avoid surprises in meetings and between meetings. One second, I'll be done. Are these communications going to be posted on the website to be open? Or again, talking about violating the Open Meeting Act by having discussions outside of public view. This board needs to have public discussions regarding the principles of operations before voting on it. It should include a discussion if any of these principles violate the Illinois Open Meeting Act and infringes on board members' constitutional rights. Thank you.
The next individual I have for public comment is Danielle Taggy.
Hello. My name is Danielle. I live on Hazelton, across from the fields. I'm here speaking for every person on Hazelton, including neighbors that got here late and can't speak. So I'm speaking for approximately 17 houses. First of all, definitely we know that something needs to be done. And everybody has seen that school deteriorate. We understand that it needs to be updated. I've lived in my house for 17 years, and I have seen so many things done to the other 20-something schools. And that school hasn't been touched once in the 17 years. You tried in 2012. I went to all these meetings, we fought, you put it on a referendum, it lost in 13. You did it this year, it lost. Granted, you tied it in with other schools, I understand that. However, after that failed, you posted that it was completely off the table, and you had 8 or 9 new proposals. One of them was graph. The neighborhood spoke up, they didn't want to lose their 10 acres. I understand. You were only going to use a small portion. They were still going to have the turf football field, 2 baseball fields. They were only going to lose 1, a whole new park. It would have been fine. Whatever. The neighborhood spoke up. They heard from you. Now graph's off the table. Where are the other 8 or 7 proposals that you guys had out? You're coming back. I'm looking out my window, and there's surveyors out there measuring the fields every day. And they said they're working for the district. They don't know what they're doing. They're just measuring. Why are you coming back to our field? Why are you smiling? Seriously?
Taking notes.
Disrespectful. You're coming back to this field for the 3rd time since 2012. And in just those years, no one's touched Jefferson. Everyone on our block agrees that something needs to be done, whether it's updating, fixing, adding on, double the size. It doesn't need to go the length of 18 houses. And mind you, the schools that are in the neighborhoods and stuff, people move there, they know what they're moving into. I moved on the block knowing the preschool was there. I love seeing those kids walking and playing and doing their things in the field. I worked in that school. I support it. And I support special ed. But the way that you guys keep coming back, and you're not, all these proposals were out there for graph. You had it posted, this and that. Where's this one for Jefferson? Is it the same one? If you're going to do something, do it right.
The next individual I have for public comments is Karen Sandburg. Sandburg.
Hi, kind of short. Hi, I'm Karen Spanico. I live on Hazelton as well. My son Paul has special needs, and he actually went to Jefferson Preschool. I would like to compliment the board. I actually also work for a park district. So I'd like to start by complimenting the board for giving your time to doing this. I understand the commitment it makes and the passion you guys have to make this a better district as a whole. I'd also like to compliment the education my son has received. Jefferson's an amazing preschool. Stephanie Fairley is absolutely, she's just a gift to this district. And I've just had a really good experience, and I really wanted to say that I appreciated that you guys let us be part of the planning phase. The education phase, I think my son's receiving an excellent education. I have no plans to move out of Wheaton, because I won't move, because I think Wheaton is an amazing district, and I know you guys have really stood behind education. But this planning piece is bothered me a bit. I loved the fact that back in the day, and I guess it was 2012. Yeah. We had, planning meetings, and we were able to help build, plan this school. And I remember they were going to put the playground behind it, and then we actually, were like, this is a community. You have to put the playground in front of it. We don't want to lose our playground. And we really. Being a park district person too, it's really hard for me to think that you can't utilize the footprint that the school's in and save our fields. Because, I'm a park and recreation person, and I'm an education person too, and I understand the need of Jefferson, but I think we really appreciated being part of the planning, and I'm feeling just a little blindsided. And the information I'm getting isn't from the board, it's from the community or from my blog. So. I would encourage you to, I guess, reach back out to us like you've done in the past. Think of all your options and think of them hard. I discourage the school being built right across, right in those fields. It's just such an awesome thing for those second graders and for the park district. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
The fifth speaker I have signed up is Brian Tatey.
Jefferson Preschool as well. Originally on the ballot, you said that you didn't want to inconvenience the children for a couple of years, and you wanted to keep them in the same building. My biggest thing is you're going to inconvenience me for life. So what I'm asking is renovate the school, double the size. There's nothing wrong with the brick building. Gut it completely. Move those kids away for 2 years. Bring them back. Have a nice day.
Now for the Superintendent's Report, Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. Just a couple of other things that I wanted to share with the board. One, thanks to the board members who had an opportunity to attend either the Wheaton or Warrenville City Council meetings this week. Both of the City Councils recognized and thanked the Board of Education for your volunteer service. I think I did a quick check just a little bit earlier today, and I think over the last month alone, there have been about 17 meetings that board members have been involved in some way, shape, or form, and you're volunteers to the community. So thank you on behalf of the community for the effort into helping to form and drive our schools. I truly appreciate it. Just want to remind the board and the community that we've got a number of events going on in our schools this Friday in honor of Veterans Day. I think one of the better decisions that the Board of Education made in the past was the decision to hold school on that day and really use the opportunity to honor and thank our veterans, educate our students about Veterans Day. And so I think all of our schools have some type of activity or educational experience planned. I know several board members are planning to attend some of those, and again, I invite you to, certainly welcome our community to celebrate that day with us as well. Next week, we are hosting, I think it's our third annual Realtor event this year. We're partnering with the City of Wheaton, the Wheaton Park District, as well as the Chamber of Commerce to hold our Realtor event and provide information on all of our agencies and how we work together within the community. So again, I know some board members planning to attend that event. I think again it's a great opportunity for us to share with those that are selling homes in our community a little bit of information about the area and the community that they're selling. So thank you for, and I just want to invite the board for that. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, I did forward on a little bit of information earlier today to board members, just making you aware of the fact that there was a bill that passed the House today that would enact a 2-year property tax freeze for all collar counties in and around Chicago. My understanding is that bill could get called in the Senate as early as tomorrow. Perhaps it really does seem to have some momentum. This property tax bill really came up very, very quickly. Well, obviously it was a bill that was in the works. It really has come together very, very quickly in the veto session. But that would impact, if passed, it would impact both the 17 and 18 tax levy years. So the 17 levy is the one that you're getting ready to spend some time on this evening. And again, it would, at least in the way that the current language reads, it would be a hard freeze to that extension. So again, that's certainly something that we've communicated very closely with our local elected officials to kind of try to understand a little bit more about that bill, but that does seem to potentially have some momentum. So we're watching that very, very closely. And then finally, I just want to thank the PTA Council, Mr. Sandburg. Thank the Sandburg PTA for their generous hospitality and support this evening. A little bit earlier this morning, the PTA Council held an annual breakfast, and we're not actually, this is probably one of the few meetings that the board is not accepting a donation from one of our very generous PTAs, but this morning I thanked the council not just for the monetary donations and the things that they bring to the school district, but the human capital that they bring to our district in support of our programs. It truly helps to make the school district a very special place. So thank you to the PTA Council. That's it, Mr. Vroman.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Schuler. We now move to the consent agenda. I will read the items on the consent agenda as follows. Number 1, approval to post revised policy 2.150, board committees for public review and comment. 2, approval to post revised policy 5.100, staff development for public review and comment. 3, approval to post revised policy 6.110, programs for students at risk for public review and comment. 4, approval of change orders for 2017 summer construction projects. 5, approval of statement of completion for the ROE for the installation of the cell tower at Wheaton Warrenville South High School. 6, approval of license and hold harmless agreement, Village of Winfield. 7, approval to dispose of surplus assets. 8, approval of Synergy Student Information System renewal. 9, approval of the modifications to the board operating principles. 10, approval of professional learning expenditure requests for board members. 11, approval of minutes, October 11, 2017, open and closed. October 12, 2017, special meeting with local officials, open. October 17, 2017, special meeting open and closed. October 25, 2017, committee of the whole, open and closed. October 27, 2017, special meeting open and closed. And approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to June 2016 is allowable by law. 12, approval of bills payable and payroll. 13, approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any items board members want removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. Really just two pieces of information that I wanted to clarify both for the board and the public. The board did get a couple of questions that came in from the community about the board operating principles. That's not a policy document. That's never been a policy document. Every time that a Board of Education is seated in District 200, the board has conducted a self-evaluation session to talk about how you will work together as a board to conduct your business. Again, in no way do any of those operating principles violate either the Open Meetings Act in the way that you carry them out or in the way that candidly they're developed. That document's always been approved in public at a board meeting. I think the last time that happened was in September of 2015. The last time that a board was seated, a question was asked, which I think is a good question in terms of posting the document. I see no reason why the document can't be posted on the board's website, but it's not a policy document. I would not post it with your board policies, but again, you've always approved that in public, and certainly that can be the board's prerogative, but I see no reason why we would not post that document. Second thing, just because a question was asked, so just clarifying for the board, the cost of Synergy is in that board report. The cost for this year at $74,597. Just clarification, that's a little over $6,000 less than what we are currently paying with that piece that came out. That's it.
Any questions or comments from board members? Chris?
I just want to go on record to say I do support the consent agenda. I will be abstaining from this vote. My daughter is on the personnel report. She's after-school aide at Whittier, so I'll be abstaining from that.
Any other comments or questions? Jim?
Number one, on the cell tower, there was a cost referred to in that document. That cost is not incurred by us. That is incurred by, or what is that cost?
Jim, it's the cost of the cell tower from Verizon.
Okay, and who paid that? Us or
Verizon.
Okay, so it's not our cost, it's money. Okay, so in the result of that, we'll be getting what we've been seeking to get is external revenue. Is that a fair statement? Okay, that's number one. On this board operating principles. As I read that, that's a good guide, and I think it's helpful to me. When I first got on the board, it was helpful to me to kind of understand it. I'm not a big proponent, as you all know, about any kind of communication that occurs to clarify on any agenda item. I like to be, whenever I think it's necessary, I bring it up in public and talk about it. But I think it's a good guide, and I think there's issues in there that I may or may not agree with, but I won't. I will take those into account as I make my decisions and move forward on a topic. But to me, it's not a violation of anything. If I work adverse to one of those comments, not that I intend to, but because it is a guide and it's helpful, but it's not a policy, I guess, and I understand that, and I think it's very important that we all do. And again, a yes vote or a no vote, I think it's rare that we don't have commentary on that. I'm clearly a commentary kind of guy, so if you don't know where I'm coming from, you'll know. But so I think that's important. And then the last one, the synergy. We had talked about that program off and on whether it was a good program for us, and I think we deferred looking into an alternative from a cost basis in the prior year. I assume that the program piece that we're not using is being eliminated as discussed, but more significantly that I assume that's still fundamentally operating adequately, and that we're not, indirectly we're saying we're not going to look into an alternative at this time, either because of cost or its general effectiveness. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Yeah, just to repeat what I've said many times at prior meetings, from time to time, particularly on consent agenda items, we review the agenda items over the weekend. They're sent to us on Friday. And typically on consent agenda items, board members will ask questions via email to clarify something in the consent agenda or get some understanding. If it's a substantive question that they ask in an email, it's the practice of the board members here to repeat that question in the open public. But we do that in order to expedite the meeting. These meetings tend to last long enough as it is. But any substantive question that's asked in the email exchange is repeated often at the board meeting. And I will verify and confirm that Jim is a commentary type of guy. So,
just to clarify that point, we don't have a board discussion. We ask questions to the superintendent who shares them back. And then, as you said, we often talk about those in public. There's no dialogue going on between board members.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I hereby ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. Matheson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Abstain.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes, the consent agenda passes. We now move to action items. The first action item is acceptance of the 2016-2017 financial audit. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you. Just a couple quick introductory comments before Mr. Farley, our auditor, come up and share that. So the receipt of the audit on an annual basis for the board really anchors you in a couple of your key financial metrics that you obviously monitor and track for the community. So a couple of things that certainly you see and get affirmed in the audit is your financial position relative to your fund balance, how we finished last year. Well, the board certainly balances a budget every year and what gets presented. This is your verification of whether the district in fact spent within that spending plan that you outlined, another metric that's on your dashboard. And then finally, as a result of the annual financial report, you do see a projection of the financial rating that you receive from the state of Illinois. So there are a couple of key metrics that come this evening, and again, I think part of the audit itself and what's been happening around fund balance does begin to answer one of the questions asked a little earlier around why is the board in a position to be able to contribute monies directly to some of your facility projects. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Farley to introduce our auditors.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. As was mentioned, we on an annual basis have an independent auditor come in and audit our books and provide the Board of Education with the necessary documents for acceptance. This is an annual process that we do in November. As Dr. Schuler mentioned, it is a gauge of how we did financially. We do budget, past balance budgets, and on an annual basis the auditors will come and report on how we do. And happy to say again that we did come in a positive financial situation, which is always good. Betsy Allen is here from Miller Cooper. She's a representative from our audit firm that has audited our books for the last 3 years, and she's going to give the board a summary. She was out and met with the Finance Committee and went through the audit probably more thoroughly with that group, but is here today to report out on where we came in.
As Bill said, I'm just going to go through the deliverables that we submitted to the district, our non-financial statements, and then there's also required communication to the board letter, and another letter where we just had a comment for a management advice that I just want to mention. I'm just going to sort of go over some highlights and sort of big picture. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me and ask, or we can do questions at the end, whichever you would prefer. The first place I'd like to start is on page 1, which is our independent auditors report. Again, this year we issued an unmodified clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we can give as auditors during our audit process. Starting on page 5 is what we refer to as the management's discussion and analysis. This is prepared by the district. It is reviewed by us. I always like to tell boards and finance committees when I meet with them that if you don't want to read a whole financial document that's 100 pages long, the MD&A is a great place to start reading it. It gives a description of the different statements, and describes the different statements within the audit. It gives it has condensed financial information, and also talks about some issues that may impact the district in the future. Starting on page 13 is what we refer to as our basic financial statements. This is what we refer to as our government-wide statements and our fund financial statements. And it also contains reconciliations that reconcile the two statements together. On page 13 is a statement of net position of your governmental activities. This is more of a statement you'd be used to seeing in the corporate industry that has all the capital assets and the debt of the district. A couple things I do want to point out here. Last year there was a replacement tax liability on the books for about $260,000. The state had come out and said that they had overpaid people replacement taxes, and so we had put the liability, posted the liability on the books to show that they have now come back and said they are not going to recoup that money from any of the districts that they overpaid, and so therefore that has been removed this year from the financial statements. Another change that you might notice too is the claims liability number is down about $500,000 this year. The district did during the fiscal year join NIHIP. They're no longer self-insured for medical, and they have joined an insurance co-op, and so therefore the claims liability number only has in there the dental portion of that you were still self-insured for fiscal year 17. Another thing I want to point out is in the long-term liabilities. Something to remember within that long-term liability number, there's approximately $25 million in there that are IMRF and TRS pension liabilities. So just remember that's not something that you're paying out each year. It's all, the funding and unfunded part of it. And every year these pension liabilities have to be represented on the financial statements. Starting on page 15 are our fund financial statements. One thing to remember when you're looking at here is the general fund that's pointed out, and there is your ed fund and your working cash fund combined together. Farther back in the document on pages 94 and 95, there are combining statements that show each of those funds separately. Something to point out here that the district, as the superintendent and Bill have both pointed out, that the district did end the year with a fund balance of approximately $62 million, which is about $3 million of an increase from the prior year, which you can see on page 19, which is more or less the income statement of the district. Starting on page 27, sorry. On page 22 of the document are notes to the financial statements. This gives a lot of detailed information that explains the data that we were just looking at on the financial statements. It displays a lot of the summary of significant accounting policies of the district and gives a lot of detail of the debt of the district, the pension liabilities, and the capital assets of the district. The next section of the report is what we refer to as our required supplementary information. And starting on page 67, there are schedules for each fund that is held by the district. It compares the budget to actual, and then also compares prior year information. It goes by all the funds and the objects that the district uses. And then to end the report, we have another supplementary information section, which starts on page 102. This has some tax levy information, as you can see on page 102. There's 5 years of information of all the assessed valuations, so it's the tax rates, and it shows the levies that have been extended for the past 5 years for the district, along with the collections and the percentage of collections that you have collected each year. There's also some information on the operating expense and tuition charge per pupil, which is a formula that's done by the Illinois State Board of Education and put on the Illinois State Board of Education form that is filed. And lastly, there's some trend information on the revenues and expenses of your general and your special revenue funds. Are there any questions on the financial statements?
Any board members have questions on it? May have some comments when we're done.
Then just real quick.
One question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you clarify the pension liability number? It's a big number. I'm not sure I understand fully what our liability is for teacher pensions.
What exactly it is? So two years ago with GASB 68, GASB is a governmental accounting standards board. So GASB 68 had to be implemented where you had to put the total pension liability for both IMRF and TRS onto the government-wide statements. TRS and IMRF both hire actuaries. They're not hired by the district that come out with the actuarial report. Within the financial statements, note I, which starts on page 41, there's a whole note on IMRF and TRS. It goes through all the assumptions that the actuaries have used, any change in assumptions they've done over the year that they use to calculate the pension liability and the pension expense for each of those.
So does that dollar amount get paid out of our operating budgets up to that number? That's what I'm trying to clarify.
So the district every year is making contributions to IMRF, making contributions to TRS. They're contractually required contributions. IMRF sets your rate yearly of what you're paying, and TRS is a set, I think it's 9.4. You know what TRS is?
The employee share is 9%, the district's share is 0.05.
Yes, so there's contractually required amounts that you're paying each year, that every district is paying. The liabilities that you're putting on here, IMRF and TRS are two different kind of plans. TRS is a cost-sharing plan, and IMRF is a defined benefit plan. So TRS is looking at it and saying, you know, here's your whole share of what your TRS liability would be, and this is the district share that they would have to pay, you know, over the years. And so if you looked at, if you looked at page 44, the TRS note, up at the top it's showing that the district's proportionate share is about $16 million, but the the state's proportionate share of the whole liability for this district is at $697 million. So if the district wasn't putting any money into it, the whole liability would be about $713 million just for this district. Anything else? And then next we have our required communication to the board letter. I just want to point out just a couple quick things on there. We list in there some GASB statements that will be effective in the future for the district. The main one I want to point out here is GASB 75. That is where what we call other post-employment benefits. Right now we put an obligation on the government-wide statements and part of your long-term liabilities. Next year we will have to go and put the total pension, the total liability again, like we did for IMRF and TRS, onto those government-wide statements. So the district will have to engage an actuary in order to come up with the assumptions that will be used and to provide us with that information for the audit next year. Just a couple other things in here. Of course, we had no disagreements with management when we did the audit. I want to thank Bill and Maureen and all their staff again this year for always making the audit an easy process when we're going through there. We had no audit adjustments, and when we did issue the report, they did sign a representation letter, a management representation letter when we issued the report. And then just real quick, the other item that we have is our management letter. The one item I want to point out here was it's what we call management advice that we put in here. And we're pointing this out to all of our districts, actually all of our clients at Miller Cooper. We put it in the letter about technology and the risk assessment of the technology. There's so much going on with technology in the world. You know, there's data breaches, there's just many things. So we're not saying anything is not being done right with your technology. We just want to be proactive and point it out to make sure that on a continuing basis that you're looking at your technology plan going forward. Someone have any questions?
Did you review our cyber risk profile, or you're just giving advice that we should?
So part of our planning phase of our audit is we don't look at like specific policies. We do look at what technology you're using, the financial software you use. I'm not a technology person, so any of the firewalls and stuff like that. So we're looking more at a big picture thing. That's why I'm saying this comment isn't saying that you don't have a plan out there. It's just saying to be proactive and keep looking at that plan and making sure it's meeting the needs of the district.
So you did not review ours? You did not review our...
No, not the exact plan, no.
Okay, I just got a couple of items I want to comment on and then ask you a couple questions. But if I look at page, let's see, what is that, 70, the end of the education fund detail revenues, page 74 or something like that. No, there it is, page 82. I'm looking at the draft. I think it's the same page number system. But one of the things we talked about, and we talk about it a lot, is we pass a balanced budget every year. Now the budget itself is balanced, meaning what we anticipate for the year to come in, we spend. And it in theory balances to zero. Now the reality though is that in a given year, if I look on page 82, we could see that in the case of the education fund, which is our primary operating fund, we had about $2.5 million of revenues that exceeded expenditures. Is that a fair statement?
You might have different page numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the last page of the general fund.
Are you looking at the whole general fund, or just
the whole general fund?
The whole general fund. Okay.
Yeah. It's around 82. Give or take a page. Ends with the fund balance in the education.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
All right. So that 207. Expenditure, about middle of the page, it shows that we had about $2.5 million of revenues over expenditures in reality versus the budget, which we anticipated revenues and expenditures to be zero. Is that a Correct statement?
Right.
Okay.
You're looking at the $320,000 compared to the $2.5 million, right?
Right, so we actually, yeah, okay, so we had a slight. All right, so that $2.5 million, what happens with that? That goes into fund balance.
Correct.
Right, and that fund balance, once we accumulate that, can be, is basically saying we had some revenue more than we anticipated or what we actually spent. And that money is now available to deal with some things like secure entries, maybe help fund some of the early learning center, et cetera.
Right.
So those are where some of the source of those numbers are generated.
Some of the sources for money to be used in the next fiscal year.
Right, or future fiscal years.
Or for future fiscal years, right.
And so, and maybe, Bill, you can answer this. What is approximately we have a policy that says we will maintain 25% fund balance, and that's 25% of our revenue base, I'll call it. And number one, why do we, that sounds like a big number to me. Why do we maintain so much as 25%? And then secondarily, what currently does our fund balance at the end of this fiscal year, how much does it exceed that 25% balance?
It's good business practice, and the state of Illinois recommends that you have a minimum 25% fund balance for revenues on hand compared to your overall budget. As a district, we're at about 30% with this, and our fund balance policy actually mirrors the financial profile score that the state sets up. We have about $9 million approximately in excess costs associated with the operational fund balance that our board policy and the Illinois State Board of Ed looks at for the purpose of calculating that fund balance.
So that $9 million is the excess fund balance that we maybe use to fund some of these projects we're talking about. And that's been an accumulation over a number of years, I'm sure. Only $2.5 million came from this year. And then more significantly, though, this report is on the accrual basis of accounting.
It's on the modified accrual.
Modified accrual.
Right.
So that means that if we haven't received money from the state, we call that part of fund balance if it came in within 60 days.
Correct.
Okay? So in reality, we don't have the cash to run the business. We got to pay our bills in cash. So isn't part of that 25% accumulation also because at the end of June, when we're paying those final bills for the year, we haven't received everything from the state. The state's been very slow, so in reality, it prevents us from borrowing money and paying interest on it, doesn't it, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's the reason that we maintain that 25% policy that's stated.
Can I just state one thing?
Sure.
So at the end of June, just so we're on the same page, when you're saying you don't have there are some of the revenues that were received within the 60 days that were recognized. So it was the revenues that weren't received for the state and federal money within those 60 days that was deferred. So
that were paid beyond.
That were paid after August 31st.
Yeah, correct. Okay. So, but that's kind of how, and those are included. The ones that we got within 60 days are included in our fund balance, but not cashed, and we can't make payments on them, and that's why we need to maintain
right,
the fund balance.
But they are included in that $2.5 million of the excess that you're.
Right. And the $9 million fund balance.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. One other thing, I'm looking again at that same page, and I don't know if somebody's got a better reference.
Sure. Clarification at that point. So fourth quarter categoricals from last year. They were late. Are they in this number?
They are reported on the balance sheet as a receivable and as deferred revenue. So they are not recognized as revenue because they were received outside of those 60 days. So they are not in where Mr. Mathis is looking at the $2.5 million that you have of excess funds in the general fund. They are not. Those dollars were received a couple weeks ago. So they did come in.
So would that add to the fund balance that we're talking about here?
When it's received, it'll add to the fund balance. But we don't count it because it came in. What's the significance of the 60 days? The significance of 60 days say it wasn't available to run the business. Okay, so if it came in, I think we got some of it in December for the prior year. And I don't know if we collected all of it from last year yet, even, as we sit here today. But, the point is that, some of those dollars, they're not available, and therefore we don't include them as revenue or expense in that fiscal year that just ended. So.
They're available now, not in this board.
If they came in, you know.
The fourth quarter categoricals came in a couple weeks ago.
Okay, and we still don't have the current year's full collection, right? That's been delayed as well. I mean, the state's not paying its bills real quick, is my point. So, I mean, we have to deal with that, and that's why we keep a fund balance and reserve so we don't have to borrow money. In the case of the education fund, again, I'm calling that page 82. You know, when I look at the budget, it is actually 82, page 82 on the current one as well. But it shows that we budgeted $183 million in the education fund. Now that was our decision of balancing that budget basically to zero. It was $300,000. But we spent $207,000. So that tells me we were $25 million over budget. What caused that?
So if you look on page, I hope my pages are the same, page 68. So part of TRS, and something that we have to report every year, is what TRS calls the on behalf payments that they're supposed to be making on behalf of your district. When GASB 68 was implemented, it's been very hard to estimate and budget for those on behalf payments. It used to be TRS would come up with a number and say, take this percentage time your credible earnings. They no longer do that. It's all based on actuarial numbers and based on numbers that come out at a different time, so it's very hard to budget for them. So if you look on page, is it your page 68, I hope, where it shows the total state sources, and it's showing that the district budgeted $46 million for the on behalf payments, but they came in at $69 million. But also realize too that when you're looking at that $2.5 million again, these on behalf payments are reported as a revenue and as an expense. So therefore, it's a wash when it comes to how it's affecting your fund balance.
So on the numbers that we control as a board and a district administratively, we did not overexpend the budget by $25 million. It was the amount of the anticipated amount that the state was going to pay to the retirement system that we never see the money on.
Right.
Where we thought it was going to be $46 million, and it really turned out to be $70 million.
Right. Okay. And like I said before, budgeting for these on behalf payments is a very, very difficult thing to do anymore. I mean, they've been jumping astronomically every year. It's not just a couple $1 million are there, and I think I've written on here, the on behalf payments for FY16 were $46 million, so that's about what the administration budgeted for, and this year they're up to $69 million. So that's a big increase from the prior year. And so if you look, when you look at your total expenditure budget, and you're looking at there's a $24 million difference. I mean, most of that there was a $23 million, almost $24 million variance between what you budgeted and what the on behalf payments came in at.
Okay, and just to put that in perspective, our budget, including that number, was a little over $200 million in the education fund.
Your budget?
I'm sorry, our actual expenditures as we recall on page
7.
But in reality, 69 million of it was this money that the state put into the pension plan in theory for our formerly retired
to fund
the retirement, either current or private, whatever, however they calculate that.
Right.
Okay, so that's saying that, okay, out of the 35% of the money that's spent for this district, the educational fund, is for pensions. Is that a fair calculation, I guess?
I'll agree with you, I have my calculator.
Well, I mean, again, 70 million out of 200 million.
Right, yeah, so it's a big number.
So the state, I mean, what we get from the state is a minor number in the big picture. I mean, what is it, less than 10% or 15%? But when you include that, the state's problems are caused by that backlog pension.
Right, and like we said before, I mean, they're telling you, this is the number that they're paying on behalf of you. I mean, it's not like you ever get a receipt that says, here, we pay this into the teacher's retirement system for you.
I suppose one could say that we engaged teachers over the years, and they qualified for a retirement plan that was a defined benefit plan as designed by the state of Illinois, and that those teachers earned that retirement. And
but it's really, well, I guess technically it's not really a defined benefit plan. I mean, Terrence is considered a cost-sharing plan, but
Let's call it a pension plan.
I guess it's called a pension plan. How's that?
All right, okay. All right. And just in the big picture again, we spend in operational about $130 million, I think. Maybe Bill can answer that question a little better.
Overall operational budget is about 160 million.
Okay, 160 million.
130 million.
Okay. And where does that put us? I mean, we have, what, 1,000 some employees?
Yes.
Okay. How does that rank us in employers in our district?
You mean, yeah, we probably have, what, about
1,800 total employees, probably the highest employer certainly in our community.
Okay, so we're clearly the highest and largest employer, and I don't know about spending, but we're clearly the largest employer. And who runs that business? Just I'm kind of getting to, we compensate people to run our business. So who runs that business?
Who are you asking the question to?
Oh, how about yourself?
Can you clarify the question?
I'm sorry?
Can you clarify the question?
Who runs our business that we overview as a board?
Well, you hire me to run.
Right. So you run basically the largest employer in the district, in our community. Is that a fair statement? Okay. The reason I'm leading to that is we're approaching a time where we're going to be paying you we're going to make a decision on your compensation. And I just want to clarify what your role in our community is. And when we make a decision on a salary number, whatever it may be, we're going to make that decision because we are one of the largest employers. Now, you probably will not get the same windfall that if Amazon moves into Wheaton, that the CEO of Amazon will get. But it is. I think it's important. And what I'm trying to get at is we have a large business here. And I know as we move into decisions on compensation, both yourself and administrators and so on, we're going to be criticized for, if we give somebody a 1% raise or a 2% raise or whatever the number is. And, I'm just trying to put in perspective that we are a significant employer in this community, and this is a big business. And, if we lose sight of that, we have a problem. And I think I'm not trying to defend your compensation at this point. I'm just want to put it in perspective as we move forward in that decision. So, one last question. The management letter. There was an item only in there on technology?
Correct.
Okay, there was another one we saw at the Finance Committee that was removed. Is that a fair statement, or is that a different? There was something about capital assets.
We did not remove it. We discussed it at the Finance Committee meeting, and it was just in regards to part of what you've asked us to do is to track the capital assets for the district. So it's a non-audit service. We've done that over the years, but due to the fact that we're doing all the tracking of them and all the spreadsheets, it has to be reported in a letter to the board.
Okay, we're going to potentially look into resolving that issue, right? Because it's not something that's what I would call earth-shaking, in my opinion, as a cohort.
It's the audit standards that require us to report it due to the nature of the work that we're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, I got a question on page 39, which is under note F for long-term liabilities. It has, actually page 38, it talks about general obligation bonds, but on 39 it talks about capital leases. And since the whole notion of the capital lease is part of our conversation for the new Early Childhood Center, I noted that after 2019, there's a pretty substantial drop-off in the long-term liability related to capital leases. Is that something that we have factored into or will factor into the notion of the financial conversation as it relates to the new building? I mean,
I would assume too that the big decrease that you have is there's not just one capital lease reported here, there's multiple capital leases. So probably after 2019, there's a bunch of capital leases that are dropping off that are being paid in full.
So I guess my point is we're carrying those leases in our operating budget now, right? They're not part of the debt service, they're part of the operating budget. We're carrying that now, and after 2019, those will drop off pretty substantially about the same time, a year or two, I don't know, when potentially another capital lease finds its way in based on the early childhood building. So to me, that would, I could kind of interpret that that might soften the impact? No?
No, the reason I'm going to say no is that those capital leases are the leases that are associated with our technology. So we lease a lot of our equipment, Chromebooks, etc. So those fall off, but I would reasonably anticipate that you may be entering into a new lease for replacement equipment at that point.
Some of the capital leases too are for copiers, so a lot of those can end up being
that's what's
replaced.
ongoing. I think it's probably
It's copiers and technology equipment are what the capital leases are for.
The copier ones we own at the end, but the laptop ones will continue. So there will be a number, but not a large number that fall off, and as they fall off.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
One last one, I feel that Brad's comment
Made me think of it. On page 102, it shows the debt service payments by fiscal year. And if we look at that far left column on there, the amount due next year is going to be about $19 million, a little over, almost $20 million. And then after that, it stays relatively the same for a couple years, and then it jumps up in 2021. Now, that's the debt that we are keeping an eye on to make sure that we can refinance that so that large hit does not hit the community back in what would be 2021 at this time. Correct? There's a four-step process, a plan we're going through to refinance that debt. We've gone through steps 1 and 2. We'll be addressing step 3 here in another year or so, and then step 4 so that that large increase will not hit. I just have a few. Could you, please? I just have just a couple questions. I noticed in the audit on page 5 and again in footnotes, pages 36 to 38, you noted our net improvement in our position by 11.4 million on page 5, and also on pages 36 to 38 of the footnotes. And that's attributable, I take it, to the increase we've seen in our working cash fund balance.
Something to point out to us. So on page 5, where you're looking at the net position that increased by 11.4 million. So that net position is on the government-wide statements that we talked about first on pages 13 and 14. So those are taking into account, you know, you're putting all, that's where all the capital assets and you're putting all the debt on there. All the depreciation is being allocated between all the different
forms of debt.
Right. So that number is the increase in your net position, not the actual fund balance. It's on the governmental funds that we've been discussing.
But then on pages 36 to 38, what are you addressing here?
Can you tell me exactly what you're looking at on page 36 and 38? Are you looking at the schedule of long-term liabilities?
Right.
Okay, so I don't understand what you're asking. I'm sorry.
When I reviewed these pages, I thought I saw it here. Again, the reduction or the improvement in our debt balance.
Okay, so right, so if you're looking at page 36,
yes,
this shows all the categories that are the long-term liabilities of the district, and it started out at around 190 million, and it's down to about 181 million. And so you can look across and you see your general obligation bonds. They started at 163 million, and they're down to about 149 million, and some of it has to do with payments, and it also has to do with some restructuring on the debt that you did during the year.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And finally, you mentioned, you commented at the beginning of your presentation about the response you've received from our staff in doing this audit and how pleased you were with that. Could you just highlight some of the things that the staff has done to assist in this audit and to make it successful?
You know, the staff is, part of our process is always providing the staff with a list of items that we need for the audit. When we come in to do the audit, that list is pretty much complete for us, and that really makes for a very efficient audit when you come in to do an audit, which we do have some other ones that nobody has anything ready for us. And really, the scheduling really starts to get gets messed up, we've always come here and items have been ready for us. When we're here at the district for a couple weeks doing the audit, they're always here to answer our questions. We ask for information, it's provided to us very quickly, so it makes it for a very efficient audit process.
Thank you very much. Does this get posted to any place? Doesn't this get posted to our website in case any community member wants to spend some time reading these reports?
You're required to post the audit on your website.
And we do post this, so it will be posted tomorrow once the board accepts it, and we post 5 years, so there's 5 years of history of all the audit documents as well as the annual financial report.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I ask for a motion and a second to accept the 2016-2017 financial audit prepared by Miller Cooper & Co. Ltd. as presented. So moved. Moved by
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes. The motion to accept the 2016-17 financial audit has been approved. The next action item is the adoption of the 2017 budget. Dr. Schuler.
Hand this over to Mr. Farley as well, who's going to walk the board through the levy that's being proposed for you to act on this evening. So, Mr. Farley.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. This is the annual process for the levy for the school district. This is obviously our largest revenue source for the school district. I'm going to walk through the presentation. I know we have a couple new board members, so this will be the first time they're getting to hear me drone on about the levy process, but we'll go through. If there are any questions along the way, please jump in. We did present this to the Finance Committee earlier in the month. I guess it was at the end of October. But this is, again, the annual process for our levy. I'm going to go talk about some terms, and we've talked about, Dr. Schuler's mentioned it already, tax caps. The school district is under property tax caps, has been since the early 90s. That limits the amount that we can receive in our aggregate levy or our operational levy over the prior year based on the Consumer Price Index of CPI. That number comes out every January for the year. We use the 2016 CPI for this 2017 levy. So we've known since January of 16 what the CPI will be. It's 2.1%. It does help us in planning and process. So we do our 5-year plan. We usually update that model right after we get the January CPI number. I'm going to talk a little bit also as we go through the process about the equalized assessed valuation of the school district. And that's basically the property wealth of our community. All 26 square miles of our district of Wheaton, Warrenville, Winfield, Carroll Stream. We'll talk a little bit about how that is, the impact of how that has changed over time, and also how it's impacted the tax rate. The tax rate is the rate that appears on the tax bills, and that is impacted quite a bit by what happens with the equalized assessed valuation of our property. And talk quickly about the CPI. It's an index that, as I mentioned, comes out every January. We find out it's delivered by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a measure of the overall basket of goods cost and how it varies from year to year. It seems to be very much impacted by the price of gasoline. We've seen over the years, and I've mentioned it from time to time, it seems the CPI kind of goes as the price of gas goes, which is not always a direct correlation to what we operate. Obviously, gas goes into our buses, but our biggest expenditure driver, as Mr. Matheson mentioned, is people. We employ over 1,800 people, so salaries and benefits makes up about 80% of our overall budget. So the CPI, the index we use, is not always a direct correlation to how we operate. This is just a 10-year history of the CPI, and you can see over the last 10 years it's been quite a wild ride with where the CPI has gone. I think it averages out to about 1.8%, almost 1.9% over that 10-year process. Within the last 5 years, you can see, with the exception of this year, we've been under 2%. So that percentage is how much more the school district can receive over the prior year in total for our operating budget. We do track the CPI year over year. It's indexed on a month-over-month basis, year over year, based on the month. We do not have the October number yet, but right as of September, we were tracking at about 2.2%. If we kept that index flat through the remaining quarter of the year, we're anticipating that we would be right around 2.2%. So we'll continue to track that, and we'll update the board once we know that number, and it'll be incorporated, obviously, into our 5-year plan. Equalized assessed valuation of the wealth or property of our school district. And obviously, this number has changed quite a bit over time. When we were in the early 2000s, going into the economic downfall that occurred in the late 2000s, our EAV was growing. As that economic downfall hit, the EAV, or the wealth of the school district, decreased quite a bit over time. It has now since restarted to rebound, and we'll show how that impacts the tax rate overall. But again, we still probably are not back at our 2008 level of where the property value of the school district was, looking back almost 9 years now. School district is, as I mentioned, the 26 plus square miles of our school district. We do fall into 3 different townships: Milton, Winfield, and Naperville, with Milton being the largest. Almost 86% of our school district is in the township of Milton. About 12.5% is in Winfield, and a small percent, about 1.9%, is in the Naperville township. Of our overall property in the school district, we're heavy residential. We have about a little over 78% of our EAV, or property wealth, in the school district is residential. Very small amount of farms, with about 17.78% being commercial, 3.6% industrial, and just under 1% falls under the railroad description. New growth. New growth is the other factor that impacts our levy above and beyond the consumer price index, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts our tax levy. New growth, as it comes onto the tax rolls, is outside of that CPI increase. So when new property comes on the tax rolls for the first time, it is taxed separately. We receive those funds, and then it becomes part of our overall property wealth and aggregate levy moving forward. This chart illustrates where we've been for the last 10 years with new growth. Just want to point out a couple things. Looking back into the early 2000s, when the economy was better, we used to be able to set our watch at about $30 million in new growth each year in our school district. And again, as the economy started to go down, we started to see the new growth, new property coming into the school district start to fall. We are a built-out community, but the developers do find areas to build. And I want to point out 2010, that's the Cantera TIF property. We point that out every year. When that new property came onto the tax rolls, I believe it was about $60 million of new growth. Of that portion that was in the school district, that was obviously a big factor that year in new growth. Then as you look forward past 11, 12, we've had little blips. 2016 and 15, we've seen increases tied into TIFs expiring. In 2016 levy, we had TIF 1 in Wheaton expired, and we had a Carroll Stream TIF that expired. So as those tax increment financing districts come back onto the tax rolls, they are treated as new growth, and the 23-year hiatus as property value that serves the district in total is brought back on. As this new growth comes onto the tax rolls, that benefits all taxpayers in the school district, because there's that shared pickup of the overall levy of the district. This chart just illustrates the CPI. We talked a little bit about that CPI index is what we're limited to, and then what our actual extension was time over time. You can see the impact. The blue line is the CPI, and then the red line is the actual extension, aggregate extension of the school district. And you can see when the impact of new growth, how the increase in the overall tax levy is greater than what the CPI is, with 2010, again, obviously being an anomaly with the Terrence property coming on the tax rolls, as well as 2016, where we had a CPI less than 1%, but yet our overall growth was a little over 2% with the TIFs this time. Talk a little bit about how we've talked about EAV and tax rate, and really with under the property tax extension limitation law, or tax caps, you know, as we've seen the EAV of the district go up, that drives the tax rate down as a process, and that's really what happened from 2005 to 2009, as well as starting again in 2015. During the economic hard times where the EAV was dropping, we saw the tax rate come up, and I'll have a chart a little later that shows how that impacts it. Because tax rates go up does not mean the district gets more money. We still are limited by that CPI. It's just how the calculation of how that money is raised overall in the school district is with tax rates applied. This chart just shows the 5-year history, and again, if you compare this back to how our EAV went in the school district, you can see in 12, 13, 14, the tax rate was rising overall for all of the different tax levy rates that apply to our school district. And then you see in 2015, it starts coming down, and we anticipate that the tax rate will continue to come down. Again, it doesn't impact how much we receive overall, but it just does show that as the EAV or the property wealth of the district goes up, the tax rate will come down. That used to be a bigger factor as we looked at tax ceilings, rate limit. Certain funds had rate ceilings, and some school districts ran into trouble where they were actually bumping up against their tax rate limit. We never had that problem, but the state has actually removed a couple of those tax rate limits because it's really such a non-factor. This just illustrates our 2016 levy breakdown. I talk about our aggregate levy. That's our operational taxes. That's 87% of our overall tax levy, with 13% or the 19 plus million that Mr. Templeson mentioned for what goes to pay our debt services or our principal and interest on debt. So our overall budget, our overall levy for operational purposes is just under $130 million. So this chart just illustrates 5 years of our overall levy percentage increase, and this includes CPI, this includes the new growth, and this includes the debt service payments. So you can see over time where our overall percentage increases of our overall levy. Again, that's all of the different funds with operational and debt service over the last 5 years. So how much for this levy process should the district receive? I mentioned that our 2016 aggregate levy was just under $130 million. The CPI is 2.1%. So I know if we were in a school district that had absolutely new growth, we would know exactly what our levy was going to be next year. That'd be the 2.1% times that $129 million, or $132.6 million. New growth at the time that we do this levy is an unknown. One of the big unknowns is listed on there, the Amazon building. We have talked to the township assessor. They have said it will come on as a partial new growth in the district. We're hoping that it may be full. We'll receive the full amount for that Amazon building that's coming on board. For those who don't know, there was a new Amazon distribution warehouse center built in Aurora, which is in our school district, barely, thank goodness. Obviously, anytime we can get some commercial impact in our school district, that helps to all taxpayers. The building was turned over to Amazon by Duke Realty on August 1st, so they're in the process of doing their assessments. We did reach out to the Naperville Township assessor to talk about how they are going to bring that property on the tax roll, so we continue to monitor that. And then our final piece for this levy is just over $20 million for our bond and interest payments for the school district. I should mention, I skipped over that every million in new growth is about $45,000 additional funds. The Amazon building was around $15 million, so that would be $700,000 in new funds. We did have a tax agreement with Amazon for them to come into the district that we will, that the township, the county clerk will address as part of the levy process. But that obviously is a nice addition to our school district. So our overall levy proposal, and again, is on the right-hand side where we've shared the 2016 information, including the rate limits, what the extension was by the different funds, what the overall tax rate was, and then our levy request. Our levy request for our aggregate rate is about 4.84%. Again, we are limited by the CPI 2.1% and whatever the new growth is. And because that new growth is not known at this time, we levy above our CPI limit of 2.1%. So we make sure that we capture that new growth when it comes onto the tax rolls. So every year we want to make sure we explain this to the board and to the community. We are limited by the CPI. We are levying higher than the CPI just so we can make sure we capture that new growth, which is an unknown at this time. Things do pop up on the radar that we are unaware of. We do talk to our township assessors, are very busy at this time of the year, but try and get some information on them as they look to tell us what the new growth is. But because it's an unknown, we ask the board to request a percentage higher than that CPI or 2.1%. So just some considerations as we ask the board for this levy. The levy collection is included in the 17-18 budget. This first payment from this levy will be received in June of 18. So that is part of the 17-18 budget. As I've mentioned a few times, we want to capture that new growth, especially the impact of the Amazon building. We've talked about how funding capital projects in the future and how the importance of that and dealing with the capital project work in our buildings is important, so we want to capture that. Pension obligations as part of the new education funding bill. There was additional legislation that talks about a tier 3 class of individuals for pension. That still is yet to be determined, but that is coming, and that does impact us because there is a board contribution associated with that. It's a mix of a defined benefit and a defined contribution pension plan for employees that were hired. The state is still working with the IRS to figure out how this is all going to work and impact all of us. So it's not in place yet, but it's something that's going to be coming. And then finally, just healthcare costs. We talked a little bit about in the past about the impact of the Affordable Care Act. We're not real sure where that's going to go, where the Cadillac tax and some of those other things that are associated with the Affordable Care Act are, but we obviously it's something to consider as we look to access the CPI and the new growth of the school district. So again, our request is to make sure that we access that CPI 2.1% plus the growth as part of this levy. Going through that relatively quickly. So again, the Finance Committee previously reviewed this request in this presentation and report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So what happens if tomorrow the Senate passes a tax freeze in terms of the new growth, the Amazon, and all of that? Nothing? We don't get anything?
It's still to be determined. You know, a lot of times with legislation, the devil's going to be in the details. There's not a lot of details right now. So as I talked to one of our state representatives about this bill and potential flaws in it, is the ability to capture that new growth as it comes onto the tax rolls. And is that going to be allowed? Is it just zero means zero and there's not that ability? So obviously that would have an impact on us. It also impacts because the extension each year is based on the prior years. If it doesn't go up, there's obviously somewhat of a compounding factor as well that we have to think about in the future and as we look at our 5-year financial plan. So that's not an answer to your question. I'm still waiting to hear what exactly is going to be included, not included. I heard there was discussion that the pension portion of the tax levy, which we levy in IMRF, may or may not be included, but right now it sounds like zero means zero. So we'll have to continue to monitor that as it hits the Senate tomorrow, and because the Senate can then make modifications to it as well as once it reaches the governor's desk if it gets that far.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll just go back to, that's about the third page backwards, the levy proposal page, just to put that in perspective. Right now, on that page, the extension is the actual tax that was levied and more or less collected last year.
Correct.
And so if I go over to the right of that, or if I take 2.1% of that, that's about $2,700,000. Okay? Okay, so
132.6, yes.
Okay, 132.6, so go back one. So literally, if on that line there, if we, even though it says 136 and an increase of 5%, basically, if all we can levy and there's no new growth, the existing community, if you want to call it that, would have an increase of the 2.7 million. That would be the 2.1%.
Spread across the district, yes.
Okay, on that operational line. And in addition, the bond and interest goes up about 700, which is maybe 3% of that number, I guess. 700, about 3.5, something like that.
Yeah.
So bottom line is that, you know, the total rise in tax, assuming no new growth, the existing community would pay maybe 3.4 million, is the way I would say it, which is about 2.3% increase across the board, with no new growth. So in effect, when we say the levy percentage is going to generate 156 million, that's not really going to be applied to the existing community unless there's new growth. And the new growth will pay for anything over 3.4.
And we don't anticipate getting that 156.
Right, but I want to make that clear, because otherwise it looks like we're levying, you know, for $7 million. In reality, because of the limitation. Now, to follow up on Chris's statement, if we are limited with a tax, let's assume that there's no increase allowed by new, property tax rates. Half of that amount would come into our budget that we're currently operating under.
Correct.
And therefore, if we passed last September or whenever we passed this current year's budget, in theory, we're going to be $1 million short. Isn't that? I mean, that's about half of what we would get, right?
Correct.
So we would be deficit spending, presumably of almost $1 million, because everything else has kind of been play. I mean, again, plus or minus the reality of the numbers, but the budget anticipated the full year collection, which could be affected by this. Correct. We understand. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments from board members?
I just want to
can you go to the chart that has the three seesaws with the EAB and the tax rate? So just to kind of talk about this new growth again. So that little diagram on the left where existing EAB, so if new growth comes into the district, that line existing EAB would go up a little bit, right? Which would push the tax rate down.
Correct.
And so that tax rate is what gets applied to each individual property, homeowner's property. If EAB, if the new growth is not included in that existing EAB, then essentially the tax rate doesn't go down, right? It stays higher?
Potentially, I guess, yes. I mean, EAB is still going to come under the tax rolls. It's just whether we
not at the full amount. So in a sense, that new growth coming under the tax rolls, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, essentially reduces the tax rate which gets applied to the individual home. So without that new growth, one could conclude, maybe incorrectly, that it would force my taxes to be higher, or homeowners' taxes to be higher. Because the tax rate would be higher without the new growth.
The rate would be higher, yeah.
Right.
Again, your individual tax bill depends a lot on the value of your property and how it compares to the median for the rest of the school district. If you're in a situation where your property values are rising far greater than the percentage increase in the overall school district, EAB, then you're going to pay more. If it's less, then you'll pay less.
And so if we were to, so there's these two variables, CPI plus new growth. If we were to say, we're not going to take the CPI, right? We're just going to leave that at zero, whether we choose to or whether the state forces us to. Essentially, we're saying we're not going to capture any of that new growth. Is that correct?
If you don't take advantage of CPI, we're not going to get any of the new growth.
Correct. Again, that's why we levy greater than the CPI to try to capture that number, which is an unknown.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Rob?
The Finance Committee has been finished?
Yes, sir.
And that's the recommendation of the Finance Committee as well?
Yes.
No other questions? If not, I ask for a motion and a second to adopt the 2017 levy as presented, that the certificate of tax levy be executed and all form be filed with the county clerk.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Crabtree.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Paulson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ms. Averton?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Broman?
Yes, the motion to adopt the 2017 as presented passes. We now move to the approval of timeline for Early Learning Center. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Broman. So just by way of recap from the board, we've come quite a bit of distance from when we began talking about Early Learning Center post the April referendum, and the history, I think, has been reviewed with the board a couple of times on where we've been in terms of scenarios that we've considered, reviewed with the board. At the last meeting, the board provided direction to continue moving forward with scenario F. That's the construction of a new facility on the existing site. What we've brought back for the board this evening for your review and approval is a master timeline for the project. So our core team, the core team consists of the board's facilities committee, district staff, staff at Jefferson Early Learning Center, as well as your architect and construction manager that serve on that team. We've developed this master timeline for the process. What it identifies as you work through, so kind of where we sit right now, in early November, that core team has met to look at the kind of the proposed concept design of the building, certainly taking into account feedback that we've received about the desire to keep as much of the green space green that sits next to the facility, the desire to make sure that any of the facilities that sit external to the Early Learning Center, the playground, those pieces obviously are public elements as well. So we've reviewed the program with the design team, the program that we need to accommodate inside of that building, and then begun to move forward with some revised concept plans. As you move down through the timeline, there really are three key points when this entire project comes back to the entire board for your review and consideration. So I just want to say, by approving this timeline tonight, you are not, as a board, making a decision to construct this building. You're simply giving us direction to move forward on this timeline, understanding that at each of those decision points, obviously the board can make a decision to continue to move forward in your planning work, or certainly if you're not comfortable with where revised budget numbers happen to sit or design happens to sit, obviously the board's at a place to make a decision. Those couple of dates, they did not come out, I think, on the printout as bold-faced as they were on the original document. But if you look at January the 17th, you've got a board meeting on January the 17th. We anticipate by that meeting that the schematic design will be complete, and so the board will have a much more detailed look at the building at that point in time. That's when we would ideally then get authorization to move forward in the design development phase, which is about another 12-week project. On April the 11th, we anticipate that design development being complete to return back to the board. Again, for more detailed analysis with each of these phases, your cost estimates are going to get kind of further refined and identified for the board. So in April, you would give authorization to begin the development of the construction documents, which would get us to a point, ideally, where the project could go out to bid in August. And then final contract recommendations would come back to the board at your August meeting. So those are kind of the three key milestones for the full board in the process. And again, I just want to mention that your facility committee is actively engaged in the development on this. We've certainly heard loud and clear from the board a desire to make sure that we can address the program, that we're cognizant of where that building is being constructed and the impact of the immediate environment, certainly around that building, and a desire from the board to make sure that we bring that building in at a reasonable cost that the entire board is comfortable with in terms of kind of a cost per square foot design. So, Brad or Rob, you want to offer any additional comment from the facility committee?
I want to talk about the budget we've seen so far, just to kind of clarify some of the comments we've seen as a board from an email over the weekend. So the numbers we've seen so far are not quotes to do the work. They're just very early conceptual estimates for the work. And as Dr. Schuler mentioned, at each step of the process, the 3 different design phases, those estimates will get more detailed. Those estimates will kind of be tested in the marketplace by individual construction trades. The estimate that's been developed is kind of a combination of the work of our construction manager and our architect, bringing kind of their understanding of what's going on in the market right now in terms of materials, increases in cost of materials, potential labor increases that might need to be factored into account. It's based on prior similar projects that have been completed by the firms collectively. It's based on it'll continue to be developed as further understanding and details of the design gets developed. So those numbers we see now, which are very early budget estimates, will get further refined and estimated in more detail as the project goes on. And then when it goes out for bid, roughly next summer of 2018 is when we're actually going to get construction trades actually submitting bids for the work, and that will be publicly bid by, as required by law, awarded by the board in an open meeting like this. And so that's how the process will be developed to kind of take our budget to actual cost for the work. So it's a process it's very normal. It's the 3 phases: schematic design, design development, construction documents are very clear industry accepted checkpoints and milestones along the way. So I guess personally I feel pretty comfortable, very comfortable with this process. As Dr. Schuler said, it gives us further review of the design concepts, the estimates, as we continue to move forward through the process. So it'll keep coming back to us, and Rob and I will continue to participate in that process as a member of the core team. So I think as a committee, and I think me personally, I'm certainly endorsing this timeline.
The other thing I think a lot about is the dialogue and engagement with community, and as well as this board. So it's not like, because there's just 3 sessions on the schedule, doesn't mean the board's only going to hear 3 times. The public will only hear 3 times from us. There will be multiple updates throughout the entire process, which is outstanding. I like that a lot. Additionally, and public comments and feedback at those meetings are always available. In addition to any facility committee meetings, our public meetings and our public comments are welcome at the committee meetings as well. Not a lot of great attendance, but I hope to see it increase. And it's a great chance to hear from the public. So not only at these board meetings, but also at the facility committee meetings, I encourage the public to come and talk and voice their concerns and point of view. I'll just echo Brad's statement. I fully support the schedule. We talked about a couple of options, and this schedule while we think there's some aggressive components to it, is very doable. We talked about that at the meeting and pressure tested that, and we believe it is very doable, and I encourage us to work to this schedule. Of course, as new developments occur and we find out new things, or if we find out other things, obviously we'd have to reconsider that, but barring any surprises, the schedule is very doable.
Questions or comments from other board members?
I have a comment. I've been consistent all along with regard to the calendar situation. I feel that we've put a placeholder and a line in the sand that this building is going to be opened up September 2019. And I think we're a long way away from where we are on the footprint, clearly where we are in the price and the investment. And I'm intrigued by this because we could go from tonight to the 17th of January. The Finance Committee we've not come out of the Finance Committee with a number. The board's not agreed upon a number. We've not agreed upon a square footage environment. And so to me, all these steps we're going through, if those elements aren't agreed upon, we've just burnt 2 months of activities that we can't fund or that we choose not to fund. And so I guess I'm back to, we're driving this calendar based on what we want to do, and I think there's a lot of steps that we've still missed. And I don't know if Mr. Matheson agrees with me. He and I sit on the Finance Committee. This board has not been presented with the final footprint, final number, and we've not had discussion about that. And I think until we establish that, all this is for naught. I'm not an architect, so these bullet points I'm certain have great value, but I think we're putting a square peg in a round hole until we know what we can afford and how we're going to fund it. And then put the footprint within that component, not do it the other way around. But that's just my opinion. I cannot endorse this calendar as it stands today.
My feedback as well in this dialogue. I said barring any surprises. I think that's the first thing. But second, we have a committee process. We work with both facilities and finance, and those teams will have. Maybe we need to do a little more work and a little more collaboration during this time. So again, I don't think we're not going to talk about this again until the 17th, which I don't think you're saying that. I think what you're saying is there's a lot to get done before that. And so my perspective would be if those groups, the Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee, can collaborate and work on a schedule, at least you have to have a schedule. Getting to this point doesn't seem unreasonable. I'm not saying we don't have challenges to overcome, but I believe the dialogue and the collaboration can get us there.
I'll disagree with that because, again, they can go through all the collaboration they want to go through, the core team, they can put designs in play and all the other elements, but the fact of the matter is that they come back to us on the 17th and they say it's $18 million and the Finance Committee says we can't afford $18 million. Now we're back to the drawing board and the core team's starting to move again. So until we have a budgeted amount that we all have voted on and agreed upon, I don't think these steps to build or design or lay out these core meetings can be effective without any guidance on what is the number that we actually can afford and we're going to approve.
So Jim, if I understand the feedback, are you asking or suggesting that the Finance Committee begin work immediately on defining that budget number?
Or the end board.
Yeah, I think I have a couple comments. Number one, we've been working on this project for going on 8 years, and I think we've looked, when we talk about different choices that were made, I heard a comment tonight that, we looked at 8, where are the 8 choices? Well, I think we vetted a lot of those, or all of those, in reality, over the cycle of getting prepared for the referendum. So, I feel that we have done our due diligence on identifying a location. I think we've also done our due diligence on identifying a repair versus a construction. I feel like I've spent, half of my board career dealing with some of these items. So, and I think that we've, as a byproduct of the failure of the referendum, I think we've focused on probably 2 primary areas, which I think are very important. And getting back to Jim's point about funding those, but one is the secure entries. I can't, every day that goes by and I watch the news, I worry about that. So that's one of our choices. And this is also a choice. So we have to blend those into the numbers. And I agree that we need to be, we need to take the steps to get solid numbers. And I believe that part of this schedule is doing that. Okay, so, and I don't feel committed at this point that I'm ready to say, yes, let's proceed because I don't know the numbers. And I think one of the things that concerns me is that 5 years ago when we had a, referendum question about the building of Jefferson, it had a number attached to it. I think, and I'm going to say it was $15 million, give or take, 14, 15. And that was a bigger building than we're talking about today. And what's happened since? Why is that cost so high? And, you know, bottom line, it's the inflation costs. And therefore, I don't know that I want to have another year of inflation. And, you know, and I think things like the property tax freeze could affect my opinion on how we proceed on this. But I think we need to get more solid evidence. And, you know, therefore, I will support this item. But knowing that in the back of my mind, I've got a price tag that I think is very important that we can achieve. And I think we're quite a ways from that yet. So I think that's really important. But as far as, you know, how we got here, why we're going to build versus, you know, repair, you know, really I believe that, you know, we've discussed that, you know, multiple times in the referendum process. And, you know, I can't understand why we'd even consider revisiting that. You know, and again, if it's not affordable, then it's going to be another issue. And I think there's factors out there that are going to influence that. So, and I think we've taken some good steps. I've heard some good feedback about, you know, we've cut the size down in this building. You know, unfortunately, the price tag hasn't dropped enough yet. So hopefully we can get to that point. But, you know, accordingly, I feel comfortable in at least proceeding on this, you know, this plan, knowing, as Rob's indicating, that, you know, there's steps along the way that'll be trigger points to move on to the next step. And I can live with that. But, you know, again, to avoid the inflation potential, etc. Thanks.
So is there anything stopping us from having the Finance Committee be working simultaneously with this process and get us some possible numbers at our next meeting? So, with that,
yeah, I don't think there's anything that's stopping the Finance Committee from continuing with that work. You know, again, I think you know, the timeline identified here is the timeline that is potentially associated with taking all the steps to design, construct, you know, a new building. Obviously, the financing element is not layered into this timeline, but hearing the interest of the board, I think that work should absolutely begin immediately. There's no reason it can't happen simultaneously.
Well, can I ask too, I'm assuming that the architects in coming up with this next phase are not operating in total vacuum. We've had an awful lot of conversations. We've heard 18 million, 17 million. We've heard people say, I want it to be 15 million. So I'm assuming, I'm looking at this operating with the assumption that they have the general ballpark of where we'd like to be in mind, but that until they get more specific, we aren't going to see a cost estimate. Is that correct?
Yeah, so again, I think as Mr. Paulson mentioned, with each phase of design, obviously your cost is going to get refined. We've taken some of the immediate steps to bring that overall cost down, right? We've refined the program scope, we've brought that square footage down. Those have the most immediate impact on it. Recognize what is embedded in very preliminary cost estimates are contingency numbers that are higher than they would probably normally be in a project, but that's based on the phase of where we're at, right? There are going to be a lot of decisions associated with design of the building, right, that are going to determine how those pieces come up, and places along the way where we're going to be able to make design decisions with that price concept in mind, right? There's perhaps a cheaper way to design a space, and you know, there are multiple, you know, other options that we can consider within the space. So yes, you know, Jenny, you're right. We certainly, I think, are very aware, and that's why I led with the fact that we have heard loud and clear what the interest of the board is in terms of being very mindful of the cost, and you know, I think we're going to be able to do that. That I think, you know, Jim, the piece that you're looking for in terms of where do we go, just from the design element, we've got to get through this first phase of schematic design to, I think, be able to provide part of what you're looking for, which is now what does the building look like, and what do revised cost estimate look like for that. But again, I see no reason why in that same iteration or period of time that the Finance Committee cannot begin its work and say, however this work is happening, kind of here's our recommendation for what the maximum amount can be, and those two pieces can come together, I think, in January in the conversation. And then we make decisions, either go from there or not go from there.
What I heard from my fellow board member is the gap may be so large between whatever the scope plan is and whatever the finance committee believes we can afford. The scope may be so large that it's just a non-starter. So why start? Right? I think we need to do the work to figure out if that gap is too large. So I hear you. I just think we need to figure out what that gap is as soon as possible, and that way we can have a more, probably better perspective on the schedule.
I think, we've mentioned the Finance Committee, why not start now? Well, why can't we start now? Number one, we don't have a number. And number two, though, let's talk about a couple of key issues that we have confronting us between now and the date we would approve this contract to proceed. Number one, we have a potential property tax freeze. That's $1 million or better issue. Number two, we're in the last year of our contract negotiations. So the teachers' costs are going to bear on this. We may find that even if we can get down to $10 million on this building or something, that we can't afford it. Okay, so I think we need to firm it up, and I do believe we should proceed in firming that up. But I think to Jim's point that, there's going to be steps along the way that we've got to make sure there are hurdles that we could still jump. So just starting to say, I can tell you right now, we've already had these conversations. If the number we're going to finance is as follows on a debt service, that's the impact. But I don't know that we have the biggest picture of all the other ins and outs that are going to happen that will evolve between now and next June probably. So, or whenever the timetable says here, where we'd have to start getting into contract letting. So I think that's and I think we, in the Finance Committee, we discussed that. And, so it's really these uncertainties that keep entering in. And now we got another one that just, cost us potentially $2 million. Because this is operating money again for this debt service payment is going to be operating money. So, until we get over that hurdle, we got to figure out a way to do it. And it all enters into that picture.
So am I right in assuming, though, the longer we wait, natural disasters seem to be happening, the cost of materials is going to go up, I'm assuming cost of labor is going to be going up. The longer we wait, is that why our price tag keeps going up every year after year, too?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the reasons that I feel comfortable in moving forward on this, because at least we're trying to get to a point that if we are going to pull the trigger, we know, but I think we have to hit these hurdles along the way to make sure that it's a affordable event. And that, and again, I think, again, just for the Finance Committee to stand over here and look at this without the input of the Facilities Committee, neither of us have enough facts to proceed unless, I think we, as a Finance Committee, have enough facts. It's just a matter of what, or maybe we don't, because what the legislature may do, what the contracts, negotiations will end up at, et cetera. Those are big facts. So, but they will become evolving as we go. But I don't think we have that on the facility side. So the cost side is something that I think we should proceed. And, just thinking ahead, we proved something tonight. We spent $70,000 on carpeting in Jefferson because it was intolerable to have a carpet that was what it was. That's a $70,000 payment that I would have probably rather spent on design, drawing, and so on in this project. And I think if we waited another year, we're going to have more $70,000 fixes on that building to use it. And that's troubling to me, because I don't think those are good dollars spent. They're absolute necessities, but they're not good dollars spent.
Let me try to wrap up this, and if I can wrap it up and talk about some things I've heard. So the idea of finalizing a footprint, firming it up, getting to that final cost. This process is what enables us to arrive at that. That's the process of design. That's the process of the discussion. That's the process of developing cost estimates. That's how you get to the end. That's how you get to the answers. We've got a proposed budget based on our professionals' experience and expertise that I outlined. I have reviewed that in detail and think it's a reasonable number. That number is about $17.3 million for the total budget. Okay, so building the building is a part of the total cost of the project. Contingencies, other costs that we have to incur to do the work, site development, stormwater, demolishing the existing building. The cost to build the actual building, if I recall, is somewhere around $14.5, $15 million. That's fairly consistent with some of the things that we've heard from our community by email. So the number we've seen so far is 17.3, which I believe that the Finance Committee can use as a basis for evaluating funding and debt service, and not debt service, but at least certificate payments and fund balance. I think that's the number we can go with. I think that's the number that our team is going to use to make sure that we're staying on budget. And so, you know, Chris brought it up. Construction cost, we talk a lot about CPI. Construction cost is not CPI. Construction cost is impacted by all kinds of things. The price of oil is a significant factor in the cost to ship goods and materials to the construction site. The cost of labor increases as individual unions, bargaining unions come up that might have to do with electrical or carpentry. Those are impacts. The price of steel. That price of steel is largely impacted by what's happening in Asia. That's a factor on the construction cost of our project. If I recall, Paul, concrete just a year ago was a major shortage, which caused construction costs to increase. World events, all these, you know, the hurricanes, the cost for drywall, that is creating a labor and material push in those parts of the country that are having an impact. So the more that we wait, is the more that we're opening ourselves up to the further risk of construction costs increases through escalation of the project. So I think if we want to zero in on a number, we want to avoid a lot of those risks. A lot of it's planned for in the current project. When we talk about making decisions that get to a final number, I often talk about that there's three variables. It's this very simple equation of decisions that we have as a district and as a board. There's the scope of the project, the quality of the project. Those two things equal basically the cost of the project. We can't fix all three of those. We can't fix the square footage, the number of parking spaces. We can't fix the fact that we have the quality of the building. We want a certain type of system. We want certain types of materials. We want brick. And we can't fix the budget. Because if we do try to fix all of those, when we get to bid day, all we have is hope. Okay, and that's not a good management strategy. So what we will play with, and our professionals will play with, is trying to balance those variables. We've got a square footage of the building, 41,544 square feet, if I have it exactly correct. That's the program based on the spaces we need in the building. We have to figure out, you know, what types of materials, what types of systems, whether we do with a structural steel frame versus a masonry load-bearing wall, what kind of windows we put in, what kind of HVAC system we put in. All those are critical decisions that feed into part of that variable. We can't start that, we can't get to those final results until we go through the process of design. And then we can balance those two to get to a recommended budget, which will eventually become a final cost. That's the process. That's the variables that the core team is going to deal with. Initially, right now, working off a $17.3 million project budget, which includes more than just the cost of building the building. That's my 2 cents, with lots of technical talk.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the timeline for the Early Learning Center as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Erickson.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
No.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Broman?
Yes, the motion to approve the timeline for the Early Learning Center is passed. We now move to the fourth action item, which is acceptance of the IASB resolutions and direction for delegate voting. Dr. Schuler?
I don't believe any additional information. Each year, the Illinois Association of School Boards does submit resolutions for consideration by its delegates. Those were distributed to the board a couple of meetings ago with an opportunity for you to review. And generally speaking, I think the process here is just if there is concern with any of the association recommendations, that's what I think we'd want to talk about, because otherwise your delegate that goes will make a decision whether we support those recommendations or not. So, are there any concerns with any of the specific?
Just for the record, for those board members that are new, they understand that these resolutions are just statements that are on behalf of IASB. They are not binding in any way.
Absolutely not. They're not binding on any individual board. It's just the association interest generally around potential legislative work that may move forward.
I agree with the recommendations. I kind of made special note of districts, Indian Prairie School District 204, Naperville School District 203. Those are our partner districts, if you will. I read them. I talked to individual board members there that I've seen professionally. That, you know, District 204 has talked about the price, the cost that they incur to host polling in the security polling in their schools. So there's a position statement on that. I thought the position or the proposed plan from Naperville District 203 about the being able to recoup you know, possible new growth and CPI that you've given up was kind of interesting. It's also like our current system doesn't incentivize us to do that because we're going to lose that forever. So this position they have, which gives a little window of time that should something happen in the state, allows them to recoup that, which would be, you know, good for them, of course, and it helps support their programs. I just think that those two districts who are partners of ours and, you know, lots of conversation go on, I think those were well written, and I appreciated the fact that IASB recommends to adopt this.
I served as a delegate at the IASB conference years past, and the one time I was a delegate, we 203, 204, and 200 took the same positions on a number of matters. So it's a common practice of ours to support each other. And by the way, unless there is another board member who wants to be a delegate, I have offered to be the District 200 delegate at the IASB conference. That's unanimous. Any other comments or questions? All right. Yeah, you do. We have a motion and a second to accept the IASB resolutions and the direction for delegate voting, and I guess to name me as the delegate representative for District 200 at the IASB conference. So moved by Mrs. Crabtree.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Paulson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes, thank you, Jim.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Burrow?
Yes. The motion to accept the IASB resolutions and direction for delegate voting is passed. Written reports, we've received the monthly financial reports and the FOIA report. We've also received the board committee reports from the Finance Committee and the Teaching and Learning Committee, and I note that both committee meetings lasted well over 2 hours. I appreciate the time and effort that the committee members devoted to that, as well as staff.
The comments, or the Teaching and Learning Committee notes, I was thrilled to see some of those conversations, and I know there's lots of progress being made. I'm just, you know, looking forward to some of those conversations getting up to the board and more of a, maybe a discussion item, whether it's a committee of the whole or a regular business meeting. I just think there's some pretty exciting things being discussed at the teacher and staff level. Could be significant in terms of student learning at the district.
Are there any other reports from board members?
I attended the SEL design team meeting about 2 weeks ago. So as a district, we are taking the SEL standards from the state and spent some time doing, breaking those out as to where they're going to be explicitly taught throughout the district. So just so the board understands, since that is a goal this year at SEL, that it is a K-12 effort that is being around that, but that we're identifying specifically what will be taught at each grade level.
Yes, Dr.
Can I just make one quick comment on the board minutes? So that is a newer practice that we've brought those board minutes into our agendas for approval, which I think is a good communication structure. I just wanted to mention to the board, though, we've got a couple of questions about, gee, I'd like to perhaps see that information. Please know and understand that at the point that the full board would potentially be considering any of these topics, you will have that information. I think we start to get into that habit of asking for kind of documents that are still at the committee level, it will kind of defeat the purpose of using committees to complete our work. So I just wanted to mention that please know and understand there's never a decision that will come to the board without the full board having the information that you need for that. I know sometimes those notes are kind of catching people's curiosity, which is a good thing, and it's not bad, but just kind of know in that request, there may be times you just have to be a little bit patient until the conversation comes full board.
That wasn't the intent of my comment, so. If that's what you
that wasn't the comment I was.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right, then topics for future discussion, the 5-year financial projections, which are typically in January, the student learning data dashboard follow-up from the last committee of the whole meeting. Our next regular meeting is December 13th, 2017 at Madison Elementary School. And do we have public comments? No, we have no public comments on non-agenda items. Therefore, I ask for a motion and second to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on the complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against counsel for the public body to determine the validity pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 subparagraph C subparagraph 1. There will be no action expected following the closed session. Do I have such a motion? Moved by Mrs. Erickson. Second by Mr. Paulson. Mrs. Hutchinson, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
I just want to comment that it's not 10:30, it's only 9:30. So I was worried there for a minute. And I will vote yes.
Mr. Groman?
Yes, and the motion to adjourn to move to closed session is approved. We are hereby adjourned from open session.